I feel like education and marketing are pretty much the same thing, and it is because ultimately what you're trying to do is to sell an idea. But that would be the advice I would give anybody around that age. Just don't get too settled, don't get too comfortable. It's too easy to get into a comfort zone and then just find that it is really hard to get out of it. I would say especially early in your career when you can afford to kind of be hopping around, you do it as much as you can within a relatively sensible approach. It's not like you're going to be jumping jobs every 2 months. But certainly 1 to 2 years and go try something else.
Today, I'm with Fernando Tucci, the learning and development professional that's currently lives in Canada. Hi, Fernando. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Alex. How's it going?
Yeah, it's all good. All good. Haven't seen each other for a while, so I'm really happy to see your face again.
Last time was karaoke in Amsterdam, so that was at least a nice parting memory.
Oh yeah, I still have a picture with you and Sean, so
Mm-hmm.
I'll be blackmailing you at some point. Cool. Yeah, so awesome. Let us kick off then. Um, so tell me how you ended up there. Uh, why tech? Why cybersecurity? Why? And I mean, I know you're initially not from Canada, so also it'd be interesting to know what was the situation around the technology in your home country, because you obviously picked that for a good reason.
Yes, yeah. So it's been a long, winding road, and I don't think it has been kind of like the road that I expected to end up in, admittedly. So, like you said, of course, I'm not originally from Canada. I just been here a couple of years. In fact, I'm originally from Venezuela. I was born in Venezuela, even though none of my family is Venezuelan either. My mom is Colombian, my dad is Italian. But I was born in Venezuela and spent the first 20 years of my life mostly in Venezuela. So to say that I know much about how working in Venezuela compares to how it works anywhere else is kind of hard to tell, because really I didn't really work while I was in Venezuela. I think my career, my professional life, my professional career really picked off after I left Venezuela. I was still a university student when I was in Venezuela uh, when I left. So really, my professional career really started mostly in Ireland when I moved to Ireland, where I spent how was it 18 years, 19 years. So yeah, my whole adult life in Ireland anyway. uh, the time that I moved there was good timing, in the sense that it was during a time that there was a lot of demand for professionals, especially around tech, around networking specifically. So interviewing, I even interviewed before I landed in Cork, and I already had the job lined up. So it was like landing and straight to the office kind of situation. Um, but how I got there in the first place, I think I always had interest in tech. I mean, I was always either. I mean, I built my first PC just from spare parts that my dad had in the closet from. I think my dad, when the PC boom happened, he really got into it, and he started getting his 2x6, 3x6, 4x6, and he just had chipsets and motherboards and memory, and he had a big old closet of spare parts. And my first PC was just me essentially going and pillaging his spare part closet.
Basically, your that was your Lego bricks.
That was my Lego bricks, absolutely. Yes. So my first Lego kit was probably a 2x6. No, but really, yeah, like I was always like either gaming or kind of experimenting a little bit with programming or stuff like that. Then when I was in university, I was doing information, so informatics, which is kind of computer science. And at the time that I was doing that, I was also in parallel doing Cisco Academy to get the CCNA.
Was it part of the university? Because I know that some universities they offer you to take the Cisco route as well.
Well, my university was so I was in a big public university, and they had the program that the Cisco Academy ran in some of the labs in the campus, but it wasn't like part of the curriculum. It was an optional that you could sign up if you wanted to. Essentially, it was something that they offered. So I had to pay additionally. It was like not part of the curriculum. I could sign up. I paid for it, and I did the Cisco Academy. and I got the CCNA. In fact, when I left the country, all I had was the CCNA. I hadn't finished my actual college degree at the time.
Which is quite interesting because so in at least in networking, at least a while ago, CCNA was basically somewhat a door opener. So it and that valued much more than the actual degree.
Absolutely, like for me was it was proof of that, right? Like I mean, I didn't really have my full college degree yet. I didn't have any kind of professional experience yet because I was still just a student. But I did have the CCNA, and it was immediately a door opener at the time. I think this was kind of like the advent of the big industry certifications being kind of like a big thing, like kind of like became a big conversation that it was just like always okay, get your certifications, and I don't know if it's the case as much anymore. I don't feel it is quite as much anymore.
I heard that to some extent, the AWS was like the new Cisco in that case. So it was but the thing with Cisco and CCNA and let's say AWS and solution architect, CCNA, I haven't got myself, but I was reading the books for self education, and it was not so. It was around Cisco, but it was also the generic networking knowledge. While if we look at AWS, it's very streamlined, narrowed down to actual AWS product.
Yeah, so what Cisco did was really, really smart because they essentially ordered no, not ordered. They essentially defined kind of like the standard of the industry, right? And by the industry, I mean specifically networking. And they became like the golden standard of like we define what education in the networking space looks like, and it became almost synonymous. You said networking and you said Cisco in the same breath. It became very synonymous, and that was very smart. And and of course, it meant that they were teaching people the fundamentals of networking. Like you said, it was not really a course that really was just Cisco, and that's all you learn. It taught you everything from all the layers to like even at the time that I did it, they even taught us how to crimp cables, like how to do the crimping of the network cables. So it was everything, anything that you needed to know. But when it came to the actual networking components, that then you did the labs in Cisco equipment. So it was very smart that they prepare you with the fundamentals, but then they taught you how to execute it using their kit, which is really a very smart way to go about it.
And I think that what they also did, and they set also the golden standard for any learning path and certification within the tech, right? So everybody was after that building their academy, their certifications, and they all were like, we would like to be like Cisco in that case. So it it was a very carefully executed and well thought business move. And yeah, it's fantastic how it actually turned out in gazillion of professionals advocating for Cisco. If you only know Cisco and Cisco taught you everything, when you arrive at the company, the first thing you would like to do if you see HP switches, you like to throw them out and just put Cisco.
Because it's what you know. It was a very smart way to go about it. The way that they built that whole and I would say maybe the successor to that might have been kind of like the VMware certification path. For a while, they're having like the VCP was the thing to have, right? If you remember, kind of like was it like 2010ish maybe?
For data centers, right? If you'd like to work in data centers, that would be the proof that you know the thing.
Yeah, but it became like this kind of like I mean, it was virtualization was a big push at the time. Everybody was either looking into it or deploying it or kind of looking into moving their workloads into virtualized workloads. So it was kind of like a good time to have that degree because everybody was talking about it. So it was kind of like the industry buzz. So like at the time, I did get my VCP, and that on itself kind of became a door opener as much as it was with the CCNA previously. In fact, the reason why I started with Trend really was because I had really good experience with VMware, because I worked for VMware at the time, and I had like all the certifications. I had like VC, I had the VCP, all the VCAs, the VCP, and I had the VCAP, one of the VCAPs as well. So
VMware itself was an industry standard. Like almost, there were some, open source solutions. There were some maybe alternatives, but to be fair, to some certain point, I never ever heard of anything other than VMware. Back to your trip from Venezuela to Cork, Ireland. So you landed and you already had a job, or you had multiple jobs, and you were kind of thinking in the process of a flight, but or you already signed a contract.
I already had signed the contract. I had signed the contract before I left, which was crazy. So like I said, it was just like landing and pretty much just straight up getting into an office like within the same week. It was insane. Because again, there was such a demand at the time for professionals in tech in Cork. There was quite a shortage that they were just really desperate to sign up to essentially tie down candidates as fast as they could.
Was it that the same time when I think Ireland passed some kind of a good law that was very beneficial for companies like Meta or Facebook at the time, Apple, to actually start opening a huge offices there?
Yeah, so I've heard it referred to as the second Celtic Tiger, which is like those kind of like a big boom in the job market in Ireland, and it has to do with the corporate tax. Yeah, they essentially made the corporate tax very attractive, which drew all the different corporations to make their international headquarters, or at least the European headquarters within Ireland.
You knew at least a couple of languages, which are quite huge in Europe. So you also not only had your professional skills lined up, but you also had languages, which also is quite beneficial in the multi-language environment like European Union and Europe.
Yes, absolutely. So I of course could speak Spanish natively and English. My English was pretty good, and a little bit of Italian. Probably my Italian was better than it is now. Haven't spoken it in way too long, but yes, so that was definitely advantageous. That was something that came up during every time during interviews when I was in Ireland. So not surprisingly, since again they tend to be like the European headquarters, so they usually look for people that have multilingual ability to be able to operate within that.
Cool. So what was your first gig in Ireland?
So my first gig in Ireland was network support for Netgear. Netgear is a hardware manufacturer. They make kind of like rack-mounted switches and stuff like that. So they make home stuff as well for ISPs and kind of carrier consumer. But I was specifically in the enterprise side. So it was kind of like a small medium business competitor to Cisco. Like they didn't really compete in the same league as Cisco, but kind of like the same products at the time. Anyway, I haven't really kept up. So it was rack-mounted switches, rack-mounted routers. Kind of like office access points and all that kind of stuff. So it was very well within the scope of networking. So the knowledge that I had from the CCNA was a shoe in.
Yeah, and then you stayed for a long time within the company, or you decided to switch?
No, I stayed with Netgear for like 7 years. I kind of started as level two, then did level three. I eventually became the manager for the consumer and carrier BU for support in EMEA. So essentially, the way that they had it organized at the time was different centers did several there were the different languages. Like as an example, we had like French. I think he was in Egypt at the time, so essentially, it was outsourced centers, and I just kind of they all kind of reported to me from the technical perspective. So that was my last job in Netgear before I left for VMware.
Why VMware? Was it that you thought that you've reached your top maximum in Netgear, or it was money wise? What was the reason?
It was a bit of everything, really. Like I think first and foremost, I was at a point in my career that I still wanted to really kind of do more technical stuff, and I felt like my job became more administrative and management than I wanted it to be. So I felt like I was kind of like slowly losing my technical edge, and that's not what I wanted at the time. Um, the pay definitely was a factor. VMware, the offer that came from VMware was way better too. And at the same time, the whole virtualization industry, it was quite sexy at the time. It was quite interesting, and I was really intrigued with it too. So there was also a personal interest in learning more and kind of expanding from just networking to a new and sexy tech.
And funny thing that the virtualization is still a thing, right? We as a tech industry, we tried to dance around, try different hoops and and shenanigans, but still, virtualization is that big thing that actually turns the whole industry upside down. So and it came from servers to our laptops, and then I mean every tech person has some kind of virtualization hypervisor installed on a laptop. So it's it's a really huge thing. So yeah, if I would be you in that situation, that would be a no brainer for me as well. I would go.
And it was again really convenient that VMware, of course, had their European headquarters right there in Cork, so it wasn't like it required a move or anything. It was just, and in fact, their offices were quite close to Netgear, so even my commute wasn't going to change very um, considerably. So it made sense in many ways. Um, but yes, I would say, like what you said there, that essentially virtualization is still around. I think not only is it still around, but also became kind of like the first stepping stone into kind of like the cloud revolution that followed it afterwards, right? Because cloud is pretty much built on top of virtualization ultimately when you're looking at um, EC2s or machines in Azure, that's virtualization as well. And then if you want to kind of go further, you look at containers and that's also a form of abstraction, a form of virtualization, really, right? So
Everything that we have right now is still more or less built on top of that. So it was a it was a revolution.
yeah, that is exactly. It gives you a really good foundation to kind of understand all the technologies that followed, right? So it was good in that regard.
You were with the company for like 5 years or more.
No, with VMware, I actually wasn't that long. I think I was only like just over 2 years with VMware um, before I left for Trend.
What made you switch this one? Because you went from a, I'd say, quite a widely adopted product, a widely adopted technology, to a cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think it had less to do with the tech, and I think it was more of a personal thing. It was like I don't think I was like a really good cultural fit within VMware. I didn't feel like I enmeshed very well, and I also the job was very stressful, like extremely stressful. And I was certainly not cracking under the pressure, but certainly I didn't want that level of pressure. I mean, some like the team that I was working with was the Premier Services team. I don't know if they still exist, but it was essentially just these big accounts, and it was kind of like a slash TAM slash support role, in which I had a big bunch of big accounts that if they had any issues, they just called me directly. They didn't call the support line; they just called me. So it was like big companies like IKEA, H&M, Fiat. So those were my accounts. And if they had an issue, they would just call me. And every time that something went wrong in their data center, it was big, right? So it was, and there were also other big companies that essentially just kind of call ad hoc if they had kind of emergency. So it was very stressful. The stakes were really high, and anything that something went wrong, it was like everything is on fire kind of situation. So it was a very stressful job. Um, which again, really good experience, really good learning, but 2 years was enough.
Basically went through the circles of hell, got your thick skin there, so you can continue your journey. And it's probably a good life school, I'd say.
I think I got less thick skin and more white hairs. But yeah,
But you also mentioned cultural fit. What was different about the VMware culture?
so now that's a difficult one to place. I really don't know why I didn't really feel like I enmeshed really well. I've reflected about that one a lot and tried to kind of come up with a good, neat answer that I can offer. And really, I cannot really say. I just didn't feel like sometimes when you're in a workplace, you feel like the culture kind of fits you, fit within the culture. I felt like I didn't feel like there was that nice harmony between me and VMware, culturally speaking. But I cannot really pinpoint to like it wasn't like there was something bad that happened or like some bad incident or like even a personal conflict with a manager or nothing like that. Like all lovely people, but I just never felt like I really meshed.
Yeah, I know that feeling that when everything around is good and paid well and even the job might be the very exciting, but you still feel that just something is off. And then there is one of my favorite sayings that when you enter a wrong room, it's better to admit that the room is wrong and go out instead of trying to fit and stay in the room. So yeah. And yeah, so then Trent, which again Cork, so pretty much the same city.
Pretty much the same commute again. In fact, it wasn't that different. No, it was a little bit different, but not quite. But yes, so that one made a lot of sense to me at the time. It was kind of like the time that I applied this was when Trend was kind of pushing into the virtualization security. So they had like deep security really kind of pushing into that agentless space and stuff like that. So it made a lot of sense because I came with a lot of background in VMware. Obviously, I had all the certification and stuff like that. At the time, I had already also finished my bachelor's, which I did with the Open University in the UK. Because, like I said, when I left Venezuela, I actually just dropped my degree and I just left and I didn't even bring my papers or anything. So I started from scratch once I was in Ireland.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was painful. Um, but I started with the Open University and I did computing IT and psychology. At the time, I think I had just graduated or just finished graduating with my bachelor's. So that was good. So I came with that degree and with the all the certifications from VMware. And at the time, I think I still was renewing my CCNA. I think I haven't done it since, but at the time, I think I was still renewing it. So I came with a fair bit of paperwork behind me to help me open the door. And that was good. Curiously enough, I initially came as support as well, but they put me to work with the endpoint team, which was like a really odd fit because I really didn't really work with endpoints ever. Like I really never did like Windows support or Linux support. Like I really didn't work with the OS that much, so it was an odd fit. But fortunately, I didn't last very long in support. They had the opening for training. At the time, it was to do coaching and QA, um, which was with Ulrike. And then I started doing that role of kind of coaching and QA for the support organization because I did come with a lot of experience from support, not only from working in these high accounts in VMware, but also even being a manager in Netgear for support as well. So I came with a lot of experience in the support environment, so I could offer that as a coach for the center in Cork.
That role was towards the internal teams, right?
Specifically, only the Cork office team. I was not looking at any other team outside the Cork office. So just doing kind of like case QA and stuff like that. It wasn't the most exciting thing. Um, but then at least that did give me the nice segue into joining the technical training team, which is kind of when we met. I was already part of that team.
It's interesting, right? How you basically, uh, if 3 times you started as a support in a different scenarios in a different environment, but still, and then you ended up in education.
Yeah, I don't. I'm actually not so surprised because even when I was in Netgear, I ended up doing a lot of education. Like as an example, one of the times that we ended with that at the time, Netgear was changing who did the Spanish support, and I don't remember what it was originally, but we changed it to Argentina. So they sent me to the Argentina office for the outsourced company to kind of teach the product to everyone in there. So I was always kind of like always finding myself connected to kind of training projects and stuff like that. And I like the aspect of training and learning and development. That was something that I really liked. It was in part some of the reason why I studied psychology. I actually really like that interaction between tech and the human mind, and the way that we kind of process and integrate with these things. So I was always interested in that overlap, and I always find myself sneaking into tasks or projects that had to do with training or with learning. Even when I was in VMware, I was part of their webinar program. So I was doing webinars. Like there are still recordings in the VMware channel with me going over some topic or another. Delivered some live sessions for like the customer days that they do in the Cork office as well, but they used to. I don't know if they do anymore. But I even kind of like presented in person to customers and stuff like that. So I always kind of again found myself to connect myself. I found ways to connect myself to education. So I'm not entirely too surprised that that kind of led me there. Now, if you ask me when I was 20 years old, if it was like, hey, do you want to be a technical or a tech educator, I would be like, no, that's not what I want to do. So it was a little bit sneaky. It was I think it was something that I really enjoyed, and it kind of I didn't really even clock that it was something that I was really passionate about until it just kind of organically became my career. But at this point, like I mean, at the point that I was already in training, it was already very deliberate because that was the point that I was already doing my masters in the CIT for e-learning design and development. So at that point, I was already kind of even nudging myself to kind of build more that professional um, formal education around education.
Probably fair to say that at that point you already kind of picked up the direction where you would like to go, and at least to be busy with this for upcoming 10 years.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely like at that point it was deliberate, but I don't think at any point I just sat down and very concretely just sketched out this is what I want to do and very neatly put a really nice circle around education. Like it was never something that was that deliberate. But at some point it made sense and it became concrete. It didn't just become incidental. Um, but again, it was not like a very deliberate choice that I just sat down and said, yes, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Well, it's interesting how we all from different life paths actually picked up the trainings. As of for myself, I was working at a local partner that does everything, and they signed me up for a training. And then there was a guy, funny enough, from Canada, so who flew to Latvia and gave the training, and that was my first training. So it was like the WatchGuard cybersecurity appliance, and I was like, wow, you actually can do trainings and that kind of cool stuff in tech. So it's not all patch cords, crossover cables. Because if you would ask me during the school, would you like to be a teacher? I would say, hell no.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was like if you had asked me that at the time, I would have been like, no, 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 no way. So it was really interesting. Like I would say even like you, it wouldn't have been like a soft no. It would have been a very hard no. So I think at some point you kind of also the way that I'm thinking that it kind of happen perhaps is that you build that experience and you build knowledge, and at some point, if you're really interested and passionate about those things, you feel the need to kind of communicate them, to kind of share that experience and share that knowledge. Um, like like a lot of the time when I've interviewed for many jobs in education, and of course I interviewed many people that are interviewing for education jobs that I'm in my teams, and uh, and I've gotten many answers to like what draws you to education, right? Like and I think the most canned answer, the most generic answer, or the most correct answer, I would say, is to say that the reason why you're in education is because you feel like you really draw enjoyment from nurturing people and seeing them grow and seeing them develop. And that is the correct answer because that is what makes a good educator, right? Somebody that has that nurturing aspect of wanting to see people grow and bloom and develop under your instruction, right? Under your tutoring. I would say I draw enjoyment from that, but I think it's a little bit more selfish for me. Like realistically speaking, from my own satisfaction of what I get from my job is certainly seeing people grow, but it's certainly, I think it's just a little bit of sharing again those learnings, sharing that experience, sharing the road and everything that came with it.
So if we put on a scale the technical expertise in something, um, some kind of soft skills, like just proper behavior and just being friendly, and that aspect that you just mentioned, that being passionate about sharing the knowledge. If you would ask me, I would say that technical expertise can be gained. So it's something that you can, go through some certifications, get experience, and that's it. Soft skills can be picked up, with again some maybe proper trainings or whatever. But that sharing of the knowledge or being around people, being at some point a centerpiece of the stage, because when you go in front of a classroom, you are against 15 people, right? So and then they're all staring at you. It's something that either it is there or it's not there. So it's not something that can be as easily gained as, let's say, the technical knowledge or soft skill.
Yeah, and I think there's two parts to that, right? Because there is the personal preference as well versus the attitude. Like as an example, there is people that I interviewed that they obviously they enjoy the idea of being on the stage and being the people that the class looks at and imparting their knowledge, sharing their expertise, sharing their experience. But there was like no like not stage presence. They had like no not the right native ability to do it in a very very easy way. So it was almost jarring that they wanted to do it even though they weren't naturally very good at it. Of course, this is a skill like anything, right? You can acquire it, you can develop it, you can. There is an entire discipline about teaching people how to have proper stage presence and stuff like that. But there is also, I think, there is some people that just are very natural at just getting in front of a classroom and delivering a session, right? Like they don't need to go to a course on how to do proper oratory to just be good storytellers and just be able to convey the knowledge in a way that is not, I'm just reading from these slides and that's all I do.
That by PowerPoint, it's the worst thing you can do.
Absolutely. It's horrific.
Anyways, so yeah, you started your training career within Trend. Was the overall education department big at that time, or it was something like baby steps?
Well, it was tiny at the time, like because we were kind of focused on Europe only at the time, right? So it was just like the three of us. It was, I think, it was just three of us at the time, and I think the team never. I mean, even when you were there, it never grew much bigger than that. It was just like 3, 4 people, right?
I think at some point we were close to have five, but yeah, initially, yeah, it was most of the time three of us were pulling off everything.
Yeah, yeah. So it was much the same, really. I didn't. It was a small and lean organization taking care of a lot. Um, it was good. Like I really, really look fondly upon those days in the technical training team. It was really interesting to kind of go to all the customer sites and all those engagements. That was actually really, really good. I enjoyed that a lot.
So um, training, spinning, going, fun. Best times, even pre-pandemic. So we all had traveling, spinning circles around the continent or the whole world. What what made you go further into the role that you took next?
Right. So the transition that came next was pretty natural. Which was, again, I was doing the degree on e-learning at the time. This was kind of like in the advent, like this was like, I don't know if it was either foresight or whatever, because I started doing that before the pandemic, but then when the pandemic kicked off and travel dried out and instruction changed to digital or virtual, it became very, very, very important. The way that I saw it at the time when I started studying it was more to do with with scalability. I just felt like the way to scale properly education was to kind of like leverage kind of like a flip learning approach, not necessarily full on e-learning or full on classroom, but there was a good overlap between. So I wanted to kind of study into ways to kind of bring that into trend, and kind of gonna got involved with different conversations in the company. That was kind of like what kicked off the idea of forming the e-learning team that I was leading initially, and which was what led the move to Canada initially. In fact, those conversations, and I think the fact that COVID happened, it just certainly made it more critical.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So pandemic, and we had no idea how we would deliver those trainings, right? So, but there was there was the mandatory thing that you will need to move to Canada, right?
No, it wasn't mandatory actually. They asked me if I wanted to. In fact, I was already looking at the time into moving. In fact, the conversation was more that I told my manager at the time after I left the team, the technical training team. I said like, look, I'm in the process of looking into moving. And at the time, I was looking into moving either to somewhere in the Netherlands, or I think I was looking into Germany as well as a possibility. And he says like, hey, would you be interested maybe moving closer to the Americas organization, because we could really use you in here? I was like, yeah, okay. So it was like, it was not like a mandate that you have to move. It was like, would you consider going over there if you're already moving? Would you consider going over the Atlantic instead? And I was like,
Why why Netherlands and Germany? Why these two countries? What was so attractive in comparison to Ireland?
I'm trying to remember what was the logic at the time, and I'm not sure I remember exactly why I was so eager to kind of move into more mainland. I'm sure there was a very good reason, but I don't remember it right now. I think the fact that I don't remember it from the top of my head probably tells me that I just wanted a change in scenery. I mean, at that point, I had been 18 years in Ireland, 18 years not only in Ireland, 18 years in Cork, 18 years in the same house. Like I didn't even move houses the whole time that I was in Cork. So probably was that more than anything else.
Was it an internal demand for some change of the environment? And then it could be potentially anything, right? So, but yeah, I agree that if you look if you look on the map and circle Europe, then most of um, the most lucrative is Germany and Netherlands, financially, and as it's kind of center, then it's easy to travel from like Munich or from Frankfurt, or from Amsterdam. It's every destination that you can imagine pretty much is reachable either via direct or just one single hop, which is, yeah, I do agree. But yeah, there was the internal demand to just go somewhere. So you've seen all the stages, I'd say, from the full, in class. Then you also did, even during my times in Trend, and when you were transitioning, you did the online learning, virtual classrooms, right? Then you went to e-learning. What was the what makes that how was that transition? How you What were the challenges for you as the person who delivers all that or crafts all that? What was your kind of adjustment that you need to make?
So like the biggest challenge was really the psychology of it, I think, right? Like when you're in front of a classroom, is really, I think if you're a good instructor, you are you're looking at your audience and you're kind of reading the room, right? You can see the confused stares. You can see the guy that looks like he's glazed over and is in another planet right now. You can see the people that are engaged, and you can kind of read the room and see, okay, maybe I need to slow down, maybe I can speed up because people are getting bored. You can kind of read the room and play it as necessary, right? And if you're a good instructor, you're not following the strict template every time. You're adjusting the learning to fit your audience, right? Which is a skill on its own, completely independently from the technical aspect of the topic that you're actually teaching, right? And that, when you're doing it in virtual, becomes nearly impossible. Like in a lot of the times when you're doing virtual classrooms, it just feels like you're just talking to yourself, and you cannot see faces. You can only see your camera. So it becomes very jarring when you're very used to being on the stage, looking at your class, and kind of like navigating the waters as it is necessary to get everybody to succeed. Um, to like being completely blind and you're just talking to yourself for all you care about. You're just recording it, and nobody's actually listening. Um, so that one was the toughest aspect. I don't have a good answer, in fact, on how to do it more effectively. I didn't do it for very long. Obviously, I cannot change it. That transition into virtual classroom training was kind of also in the transition between me still doing some classes into before moving to the e-learning role full time. So I fortunately didn't have to do it for very long because I didn't really particularly enjoy doing the virtual classrooms, admittedly. Um, so I don't have a lot of wisdom to share. Or than I didn't like it. No, sir.
Do you think that the virtual classroom is a flop, and it's just, it's like a half baked cake. It's not a cake and it's not a dough. It's just something in the middle that neither suits any of the case. Um, what do you think about that?
I think there is ways of doing it successfully, right? I think one of the bigger problems of virtual classrooms is that you make the mistake that because you can fit more people in the room because they're not physically in the room, then you fit more people in the room. So, like, it's already harder to engage with an audience that is not with you in the room because it's not just about reading body language, it's actually engaging them explicitly in a conversation, right? It's like, hey, James, are you okay? Are you following? Are you good? Do you have any questions? Versus just turning around and seeing how everybody looks, right? So one of the classic mistakes with virtual classrooms is like, okay, so we can put 40 people in here. Great, let's put 40 people in there because it doesn't matter, 1 person, 20 person, 40 person, doesn't matter. It's the person that is going to be talking. But then that limits the amount of engagement that you can do, and because it cannot be so organic and natural but deliberate in order to kind of like do a proper tutoring, it becomes impossible. At that point, you're not going to be going down a list of 40 people and saying, hey, James, hey, Joe, how are you doing? Because 40 people, you will spend the whole time just talking, just doing one-to-one, a small touch contact, to see where they're at. So what effectively ends up being is essentially you end up just doing a webinar. Really, it's not a classroom. It's more a webinar by a different name, or a much longer webinar in most cases.
I actually started at some point, maybe in 2022, to note to myself that the if we compare classroom, I can do, a 15, a 10 days classroom, and that would be fine. When it comes to virtual, you don't need to rise. You actually need to go really down to something like 5, 7 folks. That's where you actually can engage them and make sure that they're more or less following what you're doing.
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm getting at. Like, you actually need to have less people, not more people, because you have to be very deliberate about the way that you engage. Again, you cannot read the room, so you have to kind of like ask. You have to kind of reach out and do that kind of like contact and saying like, "Hey, are you guys okay?" And if there is more people in the room than that, then you cannot, because you will spend too much time just doing that part. So it's the only way that I think you can make it somewhat as effective as the in classroom training, at least from the purpose of that kind of personal level of tutoring, right? Um,
At some point, we had a an actual teacher in our team. He was teaching in university at some point, so software developer. Then he went to some corporate and stuff, and at some point he said like the training that you deliver is as good are your tools. So and that actually caught my attention. I was juggling with this phrase all around, and I again came to conclusion uh, that in class your your skills, your presence, your ability to read the room matters much more than the tools you're using. When you go to virtual, you it's like 80% of the tools that you're using that makes the delivery, not your personal skills, not even your storytelling, because you can storytell as much as you can, but if someone falls asleep or starts to writing an email, that's it, the guy's lost.
And that is a bigger problem as well, right? Like in a way, when you have people in a classroom, you have a captive audience, right? Like ideally, you don't have people on their phone, you don't have people on their laptops. You set the rules of the room, it's like, hey, okay, put your phones down, whatever, right? But when you're doing a virtual classroom, everybody is sitting in front of the most distracting device in the world, which is possibly their laptop or their phones, where they're gonna have things pinging or like the ability to just flick the screen to your email client and have all the distractions in the world there. So it's like you're fighting against two things, really. Not only the fact that you cannot do that personal connection and that personal rapport so easily, but the fact that you have also a medium that really enables you to get distracted and really enables you to kind of like pull away and lose that attention that you had on the class.
I think in general we can agree that virtual classroom is a transition period. So it's a transition period, and we are steering mostly to the e-learning. So attendees can take their classes when they are free to do so. There are no strict, they can reread or replay and all that. So what was the challenge to go to that stage in building that curriculum, or even crafting the material to make sure that you can convey the knowledge as effectively as you conveying in the classroom?
Well, I mean, it's a natural progression of the same challenge, right? Like we were talking about how it is more challenging to have people in a virtual classroom because you cannot really see them. To building content for people that are not going to be consuming it at the same time that you're even talking to them, so they are completely like you're not even there. So that challenge becomes even more accentuated, right? Because you have to build content. Like you cannot even ask in a virtual classroom, "Hey, are you okay? Are you keeping up?" Because you're not there. In pure learning, they're just doing it completely on their own, right? So when you're building, if you don't have good mechanisms to kind of like study how effective it was at transferring the knowledge, you have really no idea how well received it was by the audience, right? And most of the learning, I would say, is remarkably bad at that, at kind of like connecting with learners in a way that they need to be engaged. Most of the e-learning that I consume tends to be built in a way that is just almost like a knowledge dump. It's just kind of like a bunch of information or a bunch of information. It has it has the again, it's kind of like I was saying before that just because you can fit 40 people in a virtual room doesn't necessarily mean that you should. In much the same way, because now you don't have the constraint of time, because e-learning you can consume it at your own pace. Just because you have a theoretical infinite amount of time doesn't necessarily mean that you should include everything in the kitchen sink into a learning curriculum, because there is still the whole thing of cognitive load, right? Like as an example, I have certain buffer of how much knowledge I can absorb before I feel like I'm boiling and I just overheating and I just don't want to learn anymore. Um, and a lot of the knowledge that I find that e-learning does is just kind of, again, we have infinite time. We can cover everything, so let's just cover everything. We don't have to trim out anything. We can just do all of it. Um, And of course, it doesn't really. What happens here is like, how would it be in a classroom, right? Like, this is kind of going circling back to the initial of conversation about education. If you're in a classroom and you see that the class is getting bored while you're standing there, you can probably tell, okay, these guys know this. Let's just speed it up. Let's just, or you check, hey guys, you all know this, right? Can we maybe skip, go to the next thing that you don't know? And you kind of read the room, ask, talk to them. With learning, of course, you cannot do that. And most of the time, in fact, there is locked navigation in which you kind of have to go slide by slide by slide, video by video by video. And it is just the most tedious thing in the world, because there is also not even that personal connection. And also you're again sitting in front of the most distracting device in the universe as well, as you're doing this, watching these videos. So you're just feeling, you're getting a little bit bored. You don't have that personal connection, and you're feeling compelled to kind of split your attention somewhere else. It's a formula for complete distraction, and certainly not for successful knowledge transfer. Um, there are of course ways to fix that, but I think that that is the biggest challenge that e-learning has.
What do you think about Medium? How you build the course? Because like e-learning, it's a very widespread term, right? If you go to Udemy, then their vision of e-learning is most of the time a pre-recorded video with either talking head or just going through slides, then do some show some examples. But everything, most of the time, every lesson is a dedicated video. I On the flip side, there is another option is almost everything in text, and then you have some clickable objects, flip this, flip that, connect the dots, and all that. And then there is also something like uh, a text for theory, and then the examples or proof of concepts is pre-recorded as a video. What do you think about this? What would be the effective way to avoid the person just overheating and throwing a blanket to say like I don't want to do it anymore?
Sure. So I think it's less about the medium. Well, or let me correct the statement. It also depends on the topic that you're trying to teach, right? Like, as an example, if you're trying to teach somebody how to change a tire, you're probably better off with a video showing you how you're actually doing it, rather than just a bunch of text giving you the bullet points of how you change a tire, right? Like, if you see somebody doing it, hopefully the video is well filmed from a good angle so you can see it and you're like, okay, I got it. So it depends on the topic, but also I think one of the important things as well is allowing the learner to kind of how to put it, to self test. Like, as an example, I think one of the best ways that you can actually make e-learning effective is avoiding tedium. Is avoiding people doing things that they don't want to do, either because they don't need them, because they already know it, or because they just don't need it, period. Like, this is not what I want to learn. I just want to learn this bit, not this other 8 hours of that. um, so, like, one of the things that I'm really kind of pushing towards the idea of, like, being able to test out, like, hey, do you know this? You can either say yes, or maybe do a small test, do a small evaluation, and you passed it, fine. You don't have to do this bunch of videos. um, like, one of the clear examples that I have recently, there was some really good, the production quality was brilliant on some of the internal kind of like infosec trainings, right? Like the typical "don't fall for phishing" kind of thing, and the production value was great. But this is stuff that, of course, as a trainer, I know very well. I was already teaching people on that. But again, it was locket navigation. I had to go through all the different videos, and I was just like, okay. For a while there, I was just studying the artistry that went into building the collateral, because I'm an e-learning builder. So I was just like, oh, interesting how they did this, and I was like, that kept my interest more than the subject itself, because the subject I knew it very well. And personally, I would have benefited just by, hey, answer the quiz, you got it right, fine, you know it. Here is some resources if you want to kind of refresh, but don't make me go to 2 hours of watching videos of stuff that I already know, right?
I think the biggest problem with all these corporate internal educations that built to kind of one size fits all is that 90% of that is just played in the background. Because I remember I did the same. I just put it in the background, make sure the tab is, opened, and so it doesn't stop, and then I do my stuff, and then when it's time for a quiz I just answer a quiz and then go to the next video. So what would be your perfect e-learning setup for for let's say a cybersecurity training uh, on, I don't know, on phishing?
Well, I think it's the thing is that I've made a quote unquote joke that I find that there is a big overlap between education and marketing. I feel like education and marketing are pretty much the same thing, and it is because ultimately what you're trying to do is to sell an idea. Right? I'm trying to sell you on an idea, and in marketing, ideally, it is so you buy a product or a service. And in education, is instead so you give me your time and the cognitive effort into learning it because you see the value in the idea that I'm communicating to you, right? You see a value whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, either because got your curiosity and interested you, or because you know that it's going to be important for your day-to-day job. Then you're going to be interested and you're going to be giving your time and effort into it. I don't think that expecting that somebody to sit down in front of a course and to be just interested because they just are is realistic. Like, I mean, you have to kind of appeal to either an intrinsic or extrinsic motivator for them to be engaged. And and I think that that's a way to actually build training effectively. I think you have to find the right injection point, the right need, the right critical thing that people really care about. And that's why I've been kind of like pushing into the idea of using kind of like the marketing hook even in education. It's like even framing the topic around not a clickbaity kind of title in the sense that clickbait is usually very misleading, but certainly into a statement and something that makes you like, huh, kind of catches your attention, right? Like as an example, one of the other examples that I was making is sometimes when you get um, like maybe notifications in apps that are telling you, hey, this is a new feature, right? And you're like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Just close that notification really quick because I'm busy and I want to do something else. If you present that same statement that's like, hey, were you planning to do something like this? Or hey, have you had this problem? And you're like, yes, I've had that problem. Tell me more. Because now I'm intrinsically motivated. You're talking to me about a problem. You're not talking to me about a feature that you just pushed out. I think education can be done in the same way. If you say, "Hey, have you had this situation, or are you afraid of this thing? Do you want to overcome this? Do you like?" Again, you're kind of like appealing to that motivation. That is the way that you get people to really give you their time and effort into learning. Um, is it always possible? The reality of it is no. Like as an example, the example that you gave me as a challenge right now to do the phishing one, would I be intrinsically motivated to learn about intrinsically or extrinsically motivated to learn about phishing right now? Probably not, because I don't I don't see it as an immediate risk, or I believe that I understand it well enough. Or I think that I'm clever enough that I'm not going to fall for it, whether that is true or not. But I'm not very motivated, right? I don't really see the motivation of it. And that's what it gets really really tricky, because one of the things that you can do, right, is to have collateral built for when people need it. One of the big things that I find with training in general is that sometimes you're teaching people something that they're not going to be using immediately. They're going to perhaps be using in 6 months down the line, and by then they have already forgotten it. If they didn't put it to use, it's gone. So what you can do is, of course, kind of keep resources, keep things that they can then go back to them and, yes, I remember. Or maybe go back to a practical lab or something like that. Or maybe have a handout, have some resource that they can kind of use as a backup. And I think that that works if you expect to kind of fall into that situation. In other words, for that need, for that motivation to develop organically down the line. Maybe right now it's not interesting to me because I don't have that immediate need. But then 6 months down the line, I'm like, oh, now I have this problem, and I remember that that guy was talking about how to fix this problem. Let's go take a look at that. Now my motivation is there. Now I'm going to be engaged. But with a topic like phishing, is like, well, when will I ever be really engaged? When will I really be feel like I need to go learn something about phishing? If I probably fell for a phishing scam already, it's probably a bit too late, isn't it?
And if you haven't, then you don't actually care. That's
And if you haven't, then you're like justified. Like, see, I didn't need that. So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
well then. But again, if we talk about then e-learning, then that's supposed to be some kind of a long access, like a lifetime access, or at least a couple of years.
Yes, I know. There is another element, of course. Sometimes in a lot of industries, there is certain compliance, right? Compliance standards that essentially you have to go through this training for for a legal or organizational requirement. Like as an example, like harassment in the workplace, that kind of stuff, right? Like that has to be done from an organizational perspective. So whether you're motivated or not, you have to go through a training. Um, you can say, yeah, I'm never going to be mean to anybody in my workplace, but I still have to go through a training because it needs to be done from a organizational compliance kind of perspective. And it's tough because again, it's kind of hard to find that intrinsic motivation of, yes, I want to sit down to learn about harassment in the workplace. I mean, it's realistically, nobody's going to be very intrinsically motivated to want to learn about that. It's important, don't get me wrong, but like getting the learners to be like stoked about sitting down and learning that's challenging. That's tough.
Especially for a couple of hours, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And especially when it's probably in work hours where you probably have 20 things that are in your subconscious more critical to be tackling right now.
AI is a big thing, a big buzzword right now. And but how the language models and how that can help learners or help developers to build a good course, where you see AI in that whole e-learning, or even like classroom learning experience.
Yeah, so I think like it's a nascent technology. Of course, we're kind of still early on, but I think it's going to have a very big impact in the space of self-paced learning. Because again, if we kind of go back to what the issues are with e-learning, is that it's very one shoe fits all most of the time, right? Like you built it. If you did your due diligence, you probably studied the persona properly. You understand who you're going to be building the content for, and you build it in a way that hopefully not only appeals to their motivators, again to kind of that extrinsic or intrinsic motivation, but also that it addresses them at the level that you're at. Like, since you're building a course to onboard somebody that comes from the industry, like a specific example, you're onboarding somebody from sales that came from maybe a different security company into your current company. So you have a very clear persona, right? They come with an industry background, not necessarily with a product background. They already have some passion in the subject. They already know some of the kind of like industry challenges. So you kind of can use that to kind of craft an experience that will attract them or attract their attention, and that will benefit them, will give them the stuff that they're missing, the delta between what they know and what they're missing. But most of the time, you don't really know the persona to that kind of definition, or you're kind of trying to target a broad amount of personas with the same training. Um, so I think I mean, it can be even done right now. I don't think it's done very effectively or very widely right now, but you could use AI to become the medium, right? Like essentially, it's almost like imagine a virtual classroom by interacting with an AI tutor, and then you can say, "No, yeah, I understand that, but this is the bit that I don't get," and then the AI will adjust and tell you what you're missing, and kind of go through that like you were with a tutor, right? Like it can fit that gap, and it can help you also modulate. It can help you also dig deeper when you need to dig deeper. It can help you clarify when you have a need for clarifying questions. So I think done right, it can make that e-learning self-paced experience a lot more instructional than it is right now. Also, it allows you to engage with the content in a way that is more than just playing the video and sitting back letting your mind wander. Right? You're you're talking, you're engaging, you're asking questions. Um, Also, you have the opportunity to do like proper role plays, right? Like role playing scenarios and stuff like that. And it becomes, sometimes a lot of people complain that role play can be very awkward when you're doing it in person like that, and it becomes a lot easier to do it with an AI because you're feeling a little bit less self conscious and less silly about making a mistake, or saying something wrong because the AI is not going to judge you.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, yeah, just give it a few years. But that was in fact kind of like segueing nicely into the idea of the learning platform that I make for languages. Like I know, like I love languages. I mean, I know Spanish and I knew Italian. I studied German for a little bit. I've been studying Japanese for nearly 2 years, and uh, and and as a person, I hate making stupid mistakes. Like there are people that are very extroverted and that they can just make a silly mistake when they're trying a new language and they just bounce and they have a laugh. I'm mortified. I will be thinking about it at night, and I'll just be sitting there looking at the ceiling, feeling mortified for that word that I said wrong.
I believe in some something like Japanese, you can easily make a mistake.
Oh, quite. Um, so for me, it was like when I started building this was in particular for that. I was like, okay, I can see that I can create a role playing partner that I don't have to coordinate a schedule with, and that is not going to laugh at me and make me stay awake at night looking at the ceiling when I make a silly stupid mistake. So it was a natural thing, and I think that that kind of can pose it into education very easily because if you think about it, what is one of the best principles of teaching somebody a skill, right? And that is to allow them to practice that skill in a way that they can fail without bad consequences, right? Think about it as an example when you're teaching somebody to fly a plane, a pilot. You get them in a simulator, and the simulator can fail. You can crash the plane, you can stall it, and you can crash it, and you will learn from that experience. You're like, okay, I see what I did wrong. I crashed the plane, but you didn't end up causing damages and probably killing a bunch of people when you crash the plane, right? So you're able to fail in a because we're as humans we learn very well from our mistakes. So it's important when you're acquiring a skill that you're able to fail in a way that doesn't cause you harm because you will learn very well from it. So having these role played scenarios, having AI kind of allow you to kind of like mimic reality and fail. Like as an example, you're doing some training and you fail the scenario, but then it didn't cost the company any money or anything. Just learn from that. So I think that's where it will fit really really well.
Presumably, that AI also can adjust the complexity of based on what you're giving back based on your skills. So if it feels like or analyzes and sees that you're cracking all that pretty much, like a nut, then you need to, bump the level. Because when we judge ourselves, it's very easy to either overestimate or underestimate ourselves when it comes to, like, like in game, select the level. Yeah, easy, medium, high, or impossible. And you're like, I'm playing this for the first time, but I also played the same game or like game for a while, and I'm quite proficient there, so probably I can go into hard mode. While AI can, adjust it and make sure make sure you're not going to drop a ball in the nearest future. Because when the theory of a flow is that there is a, it's too easy or too hard, and somewhere in the middle it's where you thrive the most. So I see that's where AI can be very handy, because it can kind of find the perfect balance between the complexity. Um, but then another thing comes into the game here, and that's the costs of running all that.
Mm, it depends. Like I mean, AI can be quite costly, or it can be quite economic compared to the alternative, depending on how you run it. Right now, if you're running everything off of like a ginormous prompt and you're sending it to an expensive API provider, yes, of course, then it's going to become astronomical. The cost of training is going to perhaps end up outpacing what you would do by sending somebody actually and delivering the classroom experience instead. But there are ways of doing it, and in the way that the industry is changing is that it's becoming constantly cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to have good models that are able to do what you need to do at a lower cost. Also, to give them constrained context, such as an example using uh, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, so you don't have to be having to put everything in the prompt, but just kind of like dynamically retrieve the bits of pieces of data that you need to provide at any given time. So they're going to optimize that pipeline, and this is going to become better and better as this technology matures. Local models are becoming a lot more competent. You're seeing sometimes um, smaller models that are performing quite on par on certain tasks with the kind of like best in breed models that are generalistic. I think that it's also something that is going to be where we're going towards, rather than bigger and better generic models becoming the standard. We're going to see more over specialization of smaller models that become more practical, um, and become more likely that you can carry around on your phone and or running in your own local device, which is, I mean, it's something that is already happening, right? Um, so that I think that's where it's going. There is ways that we can make the technology make the computer room not take the whole room but take a laptop space. That's the evolution of computing, right? Like the computer originally was very impractical, and now it's very practical.
Yeah, now you can drop it in your pocket.
Exactly. And it's gonna be the same. It's gonna miniaturize when we kind of like find ways to make it fit for purpose in a smaller format.
Can we say that the general purpose modules is not the future, and the narrow down specific purpose modules are is the way to go?
Well, this is conjecture, of course. I'm not an industry analyst, but I would say if I had to put my guess on where the industry is going, it's going to likely be that. I think that we will reach a plateau when it comes to general models. Um, and I think we're kind of getting there. I think, in fact, some of the interviews, kind of like big people in the space, are saying that essentially it's just we're kind of crunching all the different corpus that we have already of human knowledge in digital form. Like there is very little more to consume. We can find better ways of doing it, but it's like the limit on general models. I think is there is a certain limit to them. But I think the beauty and the evolution of the industry will come into turning it into very specialized. And I mean, it's kind of what you're seeing already in a way, with the whole new move into agentic, right? It's finding ways to use AI to perform very specific functions that are very, very specific ways to interact with your needs, right? Like either an agent that goes and books a taxi for you or whatever. Or but it's again, it's kind of like the miniaturization already happening. It's just finding ways to kind of like make it do specific things. And I think for models, it's going to go much the same way. Just because even if we can, let's say, infinitely scale the general models, let's say that there is no cap, there is infinite amount of keep making them bigger and stronger and better. The cost at some point, it just becomes so astronomical that it's just not practical to run something like a training session against an API for a generic model that is going to be very expensive. You're going to be like, yeah, my training budget is just not it's just not able to do that. So you're going to be looking into maybe a smaller model, something that you can do more cost efficiently.
Yeah, I would like to circle back a little bit to your side project. So you're learning Japanese, and then you would like to have some kind of a sparring partner, and then the idea of the of this tool. Why you decided to build something yourself? Because I assume you're not a software developer, so networking, virtualization, training, all stuff. But why you decided to build your own app instead of just having ChatGPT on your phone? What was the uh, that kick that made you go into that route?
Sure. So, I mean, that's like I keep changing interests and programming. Like when, especially during the advent of building with AI, I really got my interest and I wanted to do something with it. And in fact, I started learning with it not for the purpose of building that app. I just started learning it because I thought that it was really interesting. And then when I was doing one of the courses that I was doing, the course the instructor kind of invited you for like think of a problem you have and let's try to fix it. Do it as the experiment for this class. I was just like, yeah, I'm learning Japanese and I don't get to practice it very often. That is my problem. So let's fix it. And that's kind of like what led in that direction. So just to say, it wasn't that the problem was there before I started coding. It wasn't like I learned it specifically to fix that problem. Um, the reason why I wanted to to do it specifically around language learning is because again I saw that language learning models were large language models were very adept at that conversation part. Like I mean sometimes the technical accuracy of the information and hallucinations. So this whole topic about giving you wildly wrong answers that was that's something that is becoming better. But even when I started building that, it was even worse. Like the models were not quite as accurate at the time. This was still when I think I started building with DaVinci too, like before GPT 3.5. So, but it didn't really matter because I was just creating a conversation partner. So the accuracy of what they said wasn't that important. It was that we were having a conversation. So I saw that there was an ability to have a conversation, and if the correctness of the topic was secondary, it was not as important. Then fantastic. So I thought that it was a nice way to use the technology without the risk of wildly giving you incorrect information.
Yeah. So, and then you've built your app, obviously, and you published that. Um, it was limited only to Japanese language.
In the first iteration, yes, because again, I made it principally as an exercise as part of this course that I was doing to fix my own problem as the tutor recommended. Um, so as I started kind of talking about it, some other people were like, "Oh yeah, I'm learning Japanese. I would love to try it." So okay, so I kind of like made it more than just for me. I put it out there. But I think the first version that actually went like broadly, more than just like a little test bed running on a temporary location, already kind of had. I think when I came out in the initial version, I already had English and Spanish as well. I think it was English, Spanish, and Japanese in the very first iteration. Um, because again, Japanese is a relatively. I mean, there's a lot of people learning Japanese, but it's not like unless you're really well connected that you can just get a successful app that unless you can reach to a lot of Japanese learners somehow, it's very, very tough to make it a successful app. Well, the Spanish speakers and English speakers, there is everybody's starting to learn either of those two.
So how's the app today?
Pretty well. Yeah, like right now, it's requiring a lot less work. Like there is a lot of things that I want to do to make it better. Like I want to expand the languages. I want to do more exercises, more like better, more kind of practical scenarios and stuff like that. But the app itself is stable. It's in a good place. The amount of users is very stable, is steady. So it's good. Like if I had a little bit more time, I would definitely like to put more time into building it upwards to kind of like make it better. But at least it's in a good place that right now people are getting benefit out of it, and I can pretty much just keep an eye on making sure that it's not going down, and it's very stable, so it doesn't really take much of my time.
Cool. Are you planning to do any other gig than that, or is there anything on your radar?
No, right now, no. Like in fact, if I had more time, I would love to kind of go and do more for that app for Kansei because again, I have like tons of ideas of how I could make it better, but I just don't have the time to kind of go and implement new features from scratch, right? Um, like when I find myself that I have the time, I kind of go and I mean, I have to support users. The thing of running your own app, right? That you're also your support, your SEO, you do everything. So if I have the time to kind of work on it, sometimes I look at SEO reports and stuff like that, and I see, okay, some links are broken. Let's go fix that. Or kind of like build new content, build new blog posts, so I'm ranking better. So right now I'm like, when I have the time, I kind of do all this kind of like maintenance and upkeep stuff. But finding the time to like sit down and build a whole new feature from scratch is a bit daunting right now. So much less going and building another app for something else at the moment.
Cool. I mean, I hope you will find some time to make it better, or to just get it, oh, maybe to Android.
Well, right now I already managed to do a progressive web app, so it's not in Google Play Store, but you can install it as an app now at least. Um, but yeah, the whole thing of publishing through Google App or Apple Store is daunting. That's a whole other mess.
You're busy with your main work, and then you also uh, try to fix the things that needs to be fixed, and then try to expand your app. But at some point, you cannot look at tech anymore. So how do you rest?
Well, I still play a whole lot of games. I guess I've done less gaming lately than usual, but I do play for a bit. But I do have, like I said, I'm quite spastic when it comes to my hobbies. I just keep trying to find new ways to do things, or new things to read and get my interest. I paint miniatures, I build things, I do puzzles. I like I keep finding new and interesting ways to keep myself distracted.
Do you even sleep?
Yeah, no, not very well. No, and of course I'm also married, so I have to find also a time to spend with my spouse and kind of have time with my wife and enjoy her company, not just be locked in doing random nonsense tinkering my own. So that's also that. In fact, maybe I should look into descaling the amount of random nonsense that I do and spend more time.
Yeah. So if you admit yourself, maybe 25 years ago, 20 to 25. So we've just invented the time machine. You go back, meet the younger Fernando, shake your hand. Would you give yourself any advice that you need to do something differently than you did, or you would just say hi and that's it?
Well, that's a tricky one, right? It's kind of like the whole butterfly effect situation. If you change one thing, it could end up having wildly horrific outcomes, for all I know. But I think if I could give myself some advice, I definitely would recommend exploring a little bit more early in the career. I think, like, again, maybe if I had not stayed for so long in my initial role, things would have ended up worse. I don't know. But I think generally what I've noticed is that, especially very early on in your career, I find that you would benefit from hopping around a little bit. Like, I find that not only for the purpose of salary, which, let's be fair, most of the time when you get a salary hike is because you change your roles and change your companies. Like, I would say that's largely the amount that you end up actually seeing significant increases in your salary, but also finding your place, finding what you really like, which sometimes is not necessarily what you think you like. Again, we're circling right back to the start of the conversation about the whole thing with education. Like, if you had asked me early on, hey, do you want to be a tech educator for a career? I'll be like, hell no. But through exploration and through kind of finding myself, I found that I really enjoyed it, and that is really something that I'm really passionate about and that I really like. So without that exploration, I would have never reached to that conclusion. In fact, my dream job, quote unquote, at the time that I was that age, when I would have gone to the time machine, I would have been probably like I would have probably wanted to be a game designer. Like, that's really kind of what got me early on. I really liked games. I really liked video games. And I really wanted to make my own. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to make them interactive. I wanted to have good gameplay. And right now I know that working in the game industry is really tough. It's really, yes, exactly. You got it. And I know that I would not want to work in the game industry as it is right now. Um, but if I had gotten my quote unquote dream may have not been that much of a dream. It may have been a complete disillusionment and disappointment. So yes, just a lot to say that I think I would recommend exploring a lot, like just hopping around different jobs and trying things that I like until I found the things that I liked. As it happens, I found it in a relatively quick time frame, so I kind of managed to do something that I really enjoy doing early in my career. But that would be the advice I would give anybody around that age. Just don't get too settled, don't get too comfortable. It's too easy to get into a comfort zone and then just find that it is really hard to get out of it. Um, I would say, especially early in your career, when you can afford to kind of be hopping around, you do it as much as you can within a relatively sensible approach. It's not like you're going to be jumping jobs every 2 months, but certainly 1 to 2 years and go try something else.
I was with my first company that when I actually got the tech job, I was there for 5.5 years, and I pretty much understand what you're talking about, because again, the butterfly effect and all that, and I'm here because I made those decisions back in those days. But initially, I see that how many mistakes I actually did in these 5 years, because I might be hopped jobs, or I might be actually uh, had more pressure on learning something else than the that position was dictating me, because we had a direction, we need to do things in that direction. But let's say I was quite interested in at some point in Python, so maybe I should start earlier when I had more free time and all that stuff.
And also professionally at that point, you could afford, like as an example for me right now, let's say that I find that I really love programming, but I don't have the experience as a programmer to kind of get into a senior gig. So perhaps I would have to go into an entry level job as a programmer if I wanted to kind of go into that career path. Right now, to maintain my standard of living, it would be very challenging because I have built a whole career around education that has reached me to where I am right now, which I'm quite comfortable. To change gears at that point is very tough. Early on, when you're just kind of like in an entry level job for skill A, going to entry level job for skill B, it's like it's not so painful, right?
So yeah, I'd say your it's a recommendation for younger self, but it's a recommendation to anyone listening us right now. It is a very valuable thing.
Yeah, like again, it's not only like, I mean, a lot of I've seen the argument floating around that you should do it because you will see a significant financial benefit, that you will see that you will essentially kind of create your initial baseline salary very quickly early on. And that is very true. I mean, in the 7 years that I was with Netgear, my salary increased, but not as much as if I would have been shopping jobs, like not closely, right? Like I would have seen a much steeper increase. But I think I mean, that aside, which is important, don't get me wrong, but that aside, I think just the exploration and finding what you really actually begin to enjoy, which is not maybe what you thought that you actually enjoyed in the first place. Again, kind of like what we were talking about, like neither of us would have been like, yeah, I want to teach. That sounds fun. But we found that we enjoyed it and we found a lot of personal satisfaction on it. And you cannot get to it without experimenting and without kind of getting there, right?
And another aspect, I would say that it prevents you from the stagnation, because when you inside a company and you actually start to stagnate, you may not realize that. But once you moved to somewhere else, you can look back and see, like, I was actually stagnating for half a year there. So this change was not only, just to try something new, but this was to actually keep me growing even in the same field. So
Yes, completely. And also, I think, I mean, thinking about it in a formative, kind of like a developmental, psychological way, like the way that the industry is changing right now. I mean, all the tech industry, not even cybersecurity alone, is very rapid change, and technologies kind of come and go and they evolve. And I think I think even creating that mentality, that mental agility, let's call it that way, to be able to kind of shift gears, to change skills, to change knowledge, rather than forming a very kind of like fossilized body of knowledge that then makes you almost very resistant to change, to acquire new skills, to develop, right? Like if you're used to just changing skills all the time, you can keep up with the industry landscape that is constantly changing because you were putting yourself through it already. Versus if you were kind of like, I did this for 7 years and this is all I did. And then suddenly the landscape is just changing it. So your tech, you don't have the benefit of forming that. You're gonna find that current cognitive conflict of like that anxiety of like things are moving too fast. I cannot find my ground because you essentially built yourself to be very stable, very slow.
Okay, so let's kick off with the first one, and that would be Google versus Microsoft.
None of the above. No, if I have to choose one, I'll choose Google.
Warm climate or cold climate?
Humid, the humidity is the factor here, not temperature. But generally speaking, cold climate. But the determining factor is really going to be humidity. I hate humidity. So no, I think like, and I mean, I've lived in Arizona, which is extremely hot or extremely dry, and I loved it. It was fantastic. But I've been in other places like within Venezuela or Colombia that are less temperature, higher humidity, and I found it unbearable just because it was just horrible. So yeah, temperature I could do either hot or cold, preferably perhaps cold, as long as it is dry.
Okay. So are you a morning person or an evening person?
Evening, easy answer.
When it comes to consuming some media, you would go with like a Netflix series, like 10 episodes or maybe a couple of seasons, or you prefer a one movie.
Mm, seasons, like more the episodic format.
So to kind of dive deeper, or what's the reason?
I think that it allows for more exploration of the subject, right? Like as an example, a lot of the movies are very constrained to kind of cover too much. So essentially, if you want to tell a very unique story that has a very unique context, you either have to do a lot of exposition to kind of cram it into those 2 hours. So you're kind of like restricted by the amount of time that you have on screen. A series, like as an example, um, I don't know, Foundation from Apple TV is really good. Like I mean, if you read the book, like it's a very complex universe, a very complex mythos that they weaved around it. The series format allows you to explore it in a way that doesn't feel like you just cram half an hour of exposition to understand 1 hour and a half of plot. Um,
Fiction versus nonfiction.
I have enough of reality with reality as is. Thank you.
So you would go with fiction.
Oh yeah, yeah. Every time with fiction, yes, yes. Even like historical fiction, alternate modern fiction. I prefer that to just nonfiction. Like, I mean, I consume some media that is nonfiction. As an example, Oppenheimer and stuff like that. Right? It's like more of a historical dramatization, I suppose, and I'm okay with that. I have studied a lot of history. I like more ancient history than modern contemporary history. But any time that I would choose, I think I would largely choose fiction.
If people would like to find you or your projects, where they can look.
Right now, LinkedIn is the better option. Is the social media that I'm actually visiting more often. So that would be perfect. The perfect place to reach out.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining in. It was a pleasure to see you again, to talk to you, and we actually discussed quite an interesting topics along the way.
Likewise, and hopefully we can connect some time and go back to karaoke.
You need to come to Netherlands then.
Have to. I'll have to.